Hello, and welcome to Thinking Out Loud. I'm your co-host, Nathan Rittenhouse.
And I'm your co-host, Cameron McAllister.
And today we're going to talk about Plato's noble lie, or so-called, and we'll talk about if there is such a thing as a noble lie, so on and so forth. But this all got kicked off by a comment on TOL Connect talking about working in corporate environments where your out-facing mission and policy is contrary to your internal dynamics in work. And that the, maybe higher ups even would use the phrase noble lie of saying, look, we know that the out-facing segment of what we're doing does not match our internal culture, but sort of establishing this quote unquote myth is actually the best in the long run for the most people involved. That idea of a noble lie goes all the way back to Plato's Republic. And so if you have a copy of the Republic with you, you can find this in book 3, right around section 414b to be exact. But let me outline what Plato's noble lie actually is from the source itself. And then I think it's actually used in a different way in a modern term. And then Cameron, I'll get you to help me dive into parsing what this might look like in today's world and language. But in what's generally called, and this is disputed, the noble lie in the Republic, Socrates is speaking and he's outlining this vision for a society, a republic, a state. And he said, look, what if you created a myth where you convinced all of the people that they were brothers and that when the gods formed them, he mixed their souls or their core essence with different materials? So you have those whose souls were mixed with gold, for example, who were made to lead. And then you had those mixed with silver who were made to be helpers. And then you had those maybe bronze and iron and clay on down to farmers and cobblers. And this, you would create this vision of classes based off of a divine sense that would make basically everybody content with the lot that they had in life. So you say, well, why does that person get to lead? You say, well, because God mixed their soul with gold. And why is this person the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker? It's because that's the way God made things. So you come up with this noble lie or this myth that produces social stability. And herein you can see an early adaptation, the idea of like the pragmatism of religion. Like, doesn't matter if it's really true or not, as long as it creates a stable society. Well, so the idea of is it noble to tell somebody something that isn't true if it makes their life better is the core of what we're leaning toward here. I want to point out, though, before we go too far, is that's where I think the modern usage of this stops. But if you keep reading just a little bit past this, somebody says to Socrates, yeah, but will people be happy? And interestingly, Socrates pushes back and says, actually, happiness of the individual is not the goal here. We're looking for a collective happiness of society in which the most people are maximally happy. And one of the distinguishing ways that he does that is he says that if you are part of the guardian class, so this is the leader class, that you're not allowed to own any private property, even have a cellar, and you're not allowed to have anything other than your basic necessities met. And the reason for that is, he said, that if you have leadership who has their own personal property, finances, and interest, that they're going to get distracted by their personal stuff and not be good caretakers and leaders of the entire state. And so I'll read from you here. He says, in many cases, it does not matter so much if a cobbler goes bad and pretends to be what he is not. He is not a danger to the state. But as you must surely see, men who make only a vain show of being guardians of the law and of the commonwealth bring the whole state to utter ruin, just as, on the other hand, its good government and well-being depend entirely upon them. So he's saying that the leadership role here is so important and can corrupt the state to such a degree that these people whose souls are mixed with gold, as it were, can't own any gold or even wear any gold necklaces or anything. They can't have anything to do with gold because it would corrupt them in their leadership. Now, where I think this is different, and I mean, probably a lot of you listening to this are thinking through the wealth of the politicians in our day and rolling their eyes. But the distinguishing thing that I want to point out here is, and that this is a crucial distinction, in the way that we use the idea of a noble lie. Generally, we're saying we're going to tell people a lie because it's good for them and it amasses wealth for us. In Plato's version of this myth, it's about the state, not about the individual. And so I see a tension here in the modern usage of this, where we're individualizing the reward, but not collectivize, like seeing the original intent of the collective nature of the state, not the individual being the one that grows in wealth. So, there you go.
Yeah.
All kinds of craziness. But so that's my opening statement. I'm sure I need to clarify some things. So get us started there.
Well, I mean, I think let's press into some of those distinctions again real quickly. We don't, you use the word collective, you use the word state a lot. These are ways of thinking that are pretty foreign to us in the United States because we are fiercely individualistic, have been for a long time. And ancient Greece, of course, deeply committed to the polis. And so if you were a citizen at this time when, the Republic was written, you would take great pride in your citizenship. In fact, that would be your stable identity right there.
Mm-hmm.
Again, something most of us don't really look at identity that way. We don't say, well, I am an American citizen. Now, some people do, but that's not very common. People don't, or, for instance, the way people used to say, I am a Miller. I am, Henry Miller's son or whomever. And, that's my identity. I'm established by this family name, this family tradition, these family, this work that we've been doing for years, whether that's being a cobbler or a blacksmith or a farmer. Again, we have come a long way from that. We don't think in those terms. And so Plato has in mind a view of not just social order, but a view of flourishing and happiness that depends very much on the commonwealth and on everybody doing their part. So just stressing how different that is.
Well,
Also,
can we?
Yeah.
I
I
was
want
going
to
to
hear
say,
what you say there, Nathan.
well, because this is where it might get a little interesting because I think this is a massive concern. Like, hey, look, you have the World Economic Forum who is trying to strategize the best policy for the collective well-being.
Mm-hmm.
And the more conservative, libertarian leaning listeners among us are going to be like, no, like this is not what we need. Is a top-down vision given to us, whether it's true or not, in order to live. Like we don't think we even want that. So the republic is odd in the sense that it is a social collective, which does not harmonize with the mythos
Mm-hmm.
that we live with today.
Well, we have to guard against reading it through 21st century lenses as well. Plato is writing at a time where we are not. The world was not a global village. That's the term that was coined by Marshall McLuhan, and so this was not a globalized scene. So.
Well,
the
but it
world
was
looks
very much
different
a
now.
combative scene, though. But to be fair,
it was Marshall.
Idea, it's an existential thing of whether or not you could run your commonwealth in a stable way because you had to provide the resources for yourself and to generate a military concept that allowed you to continue to exist. So it was,
you
it was
needed
pretty
people
touch
to
and
be
go
able
all
to
the time.
sacrifice themselves and
sure.
So you needed a vision for citizenship that would allow people to self-sacrificially, throw themselves in the front lines for the state. But this question was raised, of course, in the context that's very foreign here again of a workplace where this person works in a company, and leadership will even use the phrase, "Oh yeah, that's just the noble lie." So this is something that's very different here. Let me give you 3 quote, and we're going to put them in scare quotes because Nathan's just given you a very good ad fontes, back to the sources representation of what the noble lie actually is. And you'll see very quickly that this differs drastically. It's not a difference in degree. This is a difference in kind. But 3 quote noble lies from the for-profit sector, right? There's the one that goes, well, we prioritize our customers, even if it costs us money. So there's one. Or then there's we prioritize our employees and our workforce, even if it costs us money. And then there's the third. Sometimes this gets designated as woke capitalism. Well, we're deeply committed to these social causes and helping the marginalized and the disenfranchised, even if it costs us money. Now, I don't think I'll sound too cynical here when I say that most of these, almost all of the time, are manifestly false statements. They're mainly part of a PR campaign to make the company or whatever corporation look good in the eyes of the world. But inside, it's a very different story. That's the sense in which this question was raised to us. Now, obviously, a more accurate way of designating that would be it's not a noble lie. That's simply just hypocrisy. That's saying one thing and doing something else entirely. What Plato had in mind was indeed noble. If you have a group of elites, gold is mixed in with them, a group of elites, then they are committed to the common good, self-sacrificially so. So they forego
Hmm.
any kind of major privileges because there's a decadence that sets in. We could point to an example of this, by the way, in real life. There are many, but one recent one would be Soviet Russia. When you look at the economic policies, you would have people who were living in pretty much squalor, while the leadership were in very pristine conditions and didn't have to wait in those food lines and had much better provisions. And so that's a picture of that kind of corruption that sets in when the powerful enjoy privileges that nobody else does. So all that to say, what Plato is saying is very different from what we encounter in corporations that embrace the so-called noble lie. But
Yeah,
yeah,
Cameron, can you help us out here on like the idea of the atheist priest? I know this is something you think about. Can you or the non-believing
yes.
minister? Because this, I think that is a closer
Yeah.
picture than the corporate version of this.
So it is. I think so. The closer iteration that's very much in tradition with Plato's noble lie, because there is a degree of nobility to this, is the so-called faithless priest or faithless religious person who maintains a sense of faith for the sake of his or her flock congregation. And the that certain the idea is that certain people need to believe in belief. They need to rest assured that there are
Hmm.
certain people out there who do believe, or they need a priest to sort of, function as their, sort of uphold this belief for them. So a couple of, this priest shows up in a number of different classic works of literature. One was from Miguel de Unamuno, great writer, not as well known these days. Also wrote a book called The Tragic Sense of Life. He has a short story about a faithless priest in a small village. And another one would be Graham Greene's Whiskey Priest in The Power and the Glory. It's also a novel, a great novel. In Don DeLillo's book White Noise, there's a scene where the main character encounters a nun, and as he talks to her about her supposed belief, it becomes very clear that she does not believe and actually considers the tenets of Christian belief to be stupid. Those are her words, but she maintains the facade for the sake of others. So there is a degree of nobility in that, in that the person themselves, the priest themselves, might be filled with existential dread and anguish and despair, but they maintain this, facade for the sake of others so that they feel safe and secure
Hmm.
in their human existence.
Well,
So I think that's a closer approximation of what Plato had in mind there.
so the core, I guess, if we boil this down into the core ethical question is it okay to ever tell somebody something that isn't true for their own good? I think that's and so like we can look at the faithless priest
Yeah.
or um but okay,
Hmm.
let's talk about the elf on the shelf and Santa Claus and the tooth fairy and whatever else you tell your children to get them to behave. It could probably be argued that that's not for their benefit.
Yeah.
It's just that people tell their kids that to try to get them to be quiet or something. But there's some more difficult versions of this. It's common practice in a medical emergency or incident not to tell somebody how badly they're injured, just to keep them calm.
Right.
They're
Hmm.
bleeding all over the place, and they're like, "Oh, how am I
Hmm.
doing?" Like, "Oh, it's going to be fine. We're going to get you some help here." You're trying to keep their anxiety down. Another one that I think is
Yes.
complex
Hmm.
is people that suffer with dementia. Maybe you have a grandparent or somebody who, man, speaking truth to them is a difficult thing because of the way that they'll handle it or process it. So I think
Yeah.
if we wanted to push into it, we could pretty quickly come up with some surface level practical um, times
Hmm.
in which misrepresenting the truth would seem like the best thing to do. However, Cameron, is there such a thing as a noble lie?
Well, let's see. First of all, those instances you brought up. Can we make a meaningful distinction between distorting the facts, so that's actually lying, and withholding information sometimes? So let's say this, Yeah, so this goes along with your medical examples. Let's say another instance would be when you are getting in touch with a loved one of somebody who's in critical condition or worse. Over the phone, you may choose to relay less than all of the information for the sake, there are many reasons you could do so, but you want to reserve the full information for when this person is face to face. You want to make sure that they get there safely, that sort of thing. That's different from telling an outright lie to make somebody feel better. So I think we need to, because there are instances where also, full information is something that we want to protect somebody from. We think about also, another facet of this conversation is when we bring minors into if you have young children and somehow they gain access to some, facts or some information that you clearly recognize is more than they can handle at that moment. And so you choose to conceal, now, when it comes to matters of ultimate concern, I'm going to say that the truth ought to always take priority. Now, let me meddle for a second. I think here's another version of that I do think is a contemporary version of the noble lie. I think there's some small smidgen of nobility to it, but I think somebody, you already mentioned it, you sort of referenced it, Nathan. Somebody like a Jonathan Haidt is to an extent pushing the noble lie. Jonathan Haidt is on record that religion, he believes it's utterly false. He's a naturalist. However, he affirms its social value. And so therefore he thinks there's a lot. So a lot of Christians, by the way, especially in a time like ours where Christians are increasingly finding themselves on the defensive, there's a temptation to form alliances with some of these people and say, oh yes, we're well, we have Jonathan Haidt on our side. No, you don't actually. Jordan Peterson. That's where he was the next person I was going to go to. Jordan Peterson, Richard Dawkins. We're going to go ahead and I would say basically anybody who is a, quote, cultural Christian who hasn't absolutely, declared I surrendered to Christ and converted. So Ion Hersey Ali is in a different category there. But somebody who is a cultural Christian recognizes the rich cultural heritage of Christianity, thinks it sponsors some of our great civilizational achievements. Now, I'm on record as saying that I think that can be a stepping stone, and I do. And I think that can be, it could be a step in the right direction for somebody, sure. But if they stop short of making a full confession to Christ, this is the noble lie. And they think it's a noble lie that'll save civilization and that will repair our politics. But that's about as close to Plato's noble lie, I think, as we're getting right now, at least in terms of, our contemporary public intellectuals, Nathan. Mm-hmm. Arguing that, for the social value of religion, even though we are a select elite who are highly trained, very, very smart, and see through the veneer of religion, the masses really need it clearly because they need some sort of consoling myth to carry them through their life in an empty and pitiless universe. When I say it in these terms, you can hear in my tone of voice that I do resent this a little bit. That's a highly condescending, I think, view. Even if they do, if people will claim, "Oh, I love to read Augustine of Hippo," yeah, that's still that you are being looked down on by people like that. I'm not saying that we get aggressive in our response and all that. I'm saying you're not in the same camp. Let's kind of open our eyes here on this one.
Yeah, so I think that's where my mind immediately goes on this is the inherent elitism in it of we know best. We know what's best for everybody else, and we're kind of in this upper realm. There's almost a quasi deification of the self there that functions within that of I'm so clever. It was almost a Gnosticism of sort of like I am the storyteller who isn't part of the story. Yeah, it's you've explained it well enough. Yeah, there's a remarkable ridiculously baked right into it, I think, from the get-go. So I mean, other than that, like total
those are arrogance. You can't get away from that.
That's what I'm looking for. So there's the arrogance involved, but then there's also, I think, just the moral compromise baked into it that we as Christians would say is unacceptable. The let your yes be yes and your no be no, anything else is from the evil one is pretty clear. I don't think it's a secret code. I think it means let your yes be yes and your no be no, and anything else is from the evil one. So Jesus's commitment to the truth, and representing and embodying that in and of himself should give us a pretty clear indication that if we are trying to follow the way of Christ, then we will say the true thing, even if it's the difficult thing. But actually, Jesus is,
Right.
a good example of times in which he told people not to tell anybody he was the Messiah. So he wasn't denying being the Messiah, but he said, now's not the time to spread this message.
Yes, there you go.
So that would be an
Mhm.
example of not of the nobility of the timing of revealing the truth rather than the nobility of lying about reality. So I would make that distinction there. I think this is a miserable situation if you find yourself as a Christian working within an atmosphere where you see the blatant disregard. So I think you don't want to participate in anything that has that inherent arrogance or hypocrisy baked into it. And there's a sense in which there's an odd feature here that if you are propagating a noble lie, there's a virtue ethics component of this too. Is like think about the type of person that this is making you become.
Mhm.
So I'm saying, well, I'm
Yes.
professionally now, I'm a propagator of lies, but then personally,
Mhm.
I'm involved in this as well. That's a tough spot to be in because you have to be thinking about not just the economics and the sociology and the cultural stability of it, but what does it say for the stability? Even if you were going to pitch it to yourself, and I think this is where we get away with it, is we say, well, clearly this is for the good. So as long as it has the social practicality to it, um, but do you want to be a part of a culture where people tell each other lies in order to stabilize the culture? Like, is that a stable culture? So it's almost self-defeating
Mhm.
when you break it down structurally and set aside sort of the subconscious emotivism that we attach into it.
Well, we have to get back to the notion of truth as something that is independent of our will. We are so conditioned these days to pursue something that just is functional and that works for us. So, this is why I think, Nathan, from the start, you've been suspicious of a lot of these arguments for Christianity that see it as foundational to social order, because that's very pragmatic. You think, oh, well,
Which it
it
is, but that's not
it
the
is
starting
so
motivation.
Christianity is incidentally, kind of related to good social order. It is and it isn't. It is in the sense that, so here, let's just press into this for a second. So it is and it isn't. It is in the sense that it offers a complete vision of human life, the world, but something greater than human beings. Gives us, we are people made in the image of God. We were made by him for him. Therefore, we can understand the world around us. It sponsors, in that sense, the scientific pursuit of trying to understand our universe. It sponsors our philosophical efforts to understand the nature of reality, all of that.
Justice,
Not
forgiveness,
because we've discovered God.
reconciliation, human
Right.
relationships. Yeah. So
All of it. Not because we've discovered God, but because God has come and found us, has sought us in Jesus Christ, has revealed himself decisively to us in his son, Jesus Christ. So that full revelation. So on the one hand, you have that. But on the other hand, here's where Christianity doesn't quote work. Christianity is thoroughly and completely iconoclastic. It is against
mhm.
all idols. Christ shatters all idols. In fact, Christ slowly and sort of gently, I don't know if gentle is the right word, but eventually crushed under his heel the whole pagan world of antiquity. It is gone. It is vanquished. Whatever pagan murmurings we have today don't bear even the slightest resemblance to true earnest pagans of ancient times. And why? Because Jesus has crushed all those gods. They're
All these
gone.
amateur
And so
pagans
in
these
that
days.
sense, Christianity, well, because Christianity is iconoclastic and opposed to idols, there is always inescapably this side of heaven going to be a thoroughly countercultural aspect to Christianity. That's why Christianity doesn't quote work today, in the sense that
Time out.
our cultural orthodoxy, our sexual ethics, all of that, it's not going to work.
Okay, hang on a second though, because so Jesus says to Pilate, "My kingdom is not of this world." In the iconoclasm of Christ, he also doesn't allow you to elevate the nation state into an idol, also, which is what the Republic is all
Right.
about. I mean, the title of the book is called The Republic.
It is.
It's about
Yes.
how do you form a group of people who will fight well together to preserve the state. and defend our fields and
Mhm.
cropland and our, and Jesus kind of isn't doing that.
Yep.
So it's iconoclastic, not just in the well, think about this. Jesus goes even so far as to say, don't worry about what you'll eat or what you'll wear. For the pagans run after these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. So there's a point here of like we can go like, yeah, Jesus, you took out Zeus, and but then he starts, he starts cutting out more than just what we consider to be cancer. He starts getting into some of the flesh and bone of what we consider to be
Okay,
perhaps
look,
idols on our own side.
there is a venerable tradition of eternal cities. And there is a tradition of looking at America as a city on the hill. But yeah, we have Plato's Republic. The glorious Roman vision, by the way, is Virgil's Aeneid. I mean, that was self-consciously constructed to be the great epic of the eternal city. But again, so Christianity, clear and present threat to that. Christianity would say, no, there is no, this world is passing away. Whatever city you think is eternal here is nothing more than an idol. I mean, the scriptural language for that is usually the city of Babylon is used as the kind of stand-in representative for those idolatrous kind of cities that are erected against, the true city, the heavenly city, to which we are journeying. But it's, of course, this is we're moving toward a restored new heavens and a new earth. So again, I just want to stress that to say, I mean, if Christianity is something that plays some sort of mainly functional role for giving you some kind of ideal earthly city or utopia, you've misunderstood it.
Somebody said,
incidentally, it can sponsor some great achievements, and it has, but those are byproducts of God's people who are faithfully pursuing Jesus Christ and his kingdom, and send out redemptive ripples in this world.
Yeah,
but they also understand this world's is passing away.
Let me try it this way. How about like something like this is a quote, but seek first the kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you.
Absolutely.
So, but I don't see how you can do that and flirt with the idea that there's such a thing as a noble lie. So I think we can roundly say
Christianity. Well, if you're embracing Christianity as some sort of noble lie, you are completely misappropriating and misunderstanding Christianity, because go to Scripture and you will see that the Christianity is proclaimed as truth, capital T, truth. And I still love Leslie Newbigin's phrase: the gospel is public truth. So it's truth for everybody. That it's not just your own privatized values. It's not some civilizational ideal. It's not something that gives you great literature. No, it's proclaimed as truth, capital T, truth. And if you're holding on to it as something else, as some sort of relic from a bygone era that's precious for us but isn't true, you've misunderstood it.
Yeah, well, there you have it.
And I think we just have to be honest about it.
So two parts of that. We kind of got deep into the woods there on the commitment to truth that comes within Christianity, but we also, if we tie this all the way back around to the original question, we would softly suggest that perhaps the way that the phrase noble lie in reference to Plato, that it's kind of jovially used in a modern sense, doesn't really capture and captivate the original intent there. So we want to defend Christ and maybe perhaps defend Plato a little bit in this.
Definitely. Yeah. Let's defend Plato.
So, we won't do that on most categories, but I think this is a good example of going back and reading the actual referent point, getting our heads wrapped around that, and then going from there. But it's a great discussion. It's a great question, really thoughtful topic, because we are living in a time in which this concept is alive and well, and we want to think about how we live well as followers of Christ in this time. So, yeah, again, thanks for a good question. If you have other questions or want to join in on the discussion, TOL Connect, you can find information about how to join that on our website at toltogether.com, or you can also email us questions at info@toltogether.com, or if you just want Cameron's take on some section of the Republic, maybe maybe we'll get that.
Or Nathan's.
No promises that we'll go back and read the classical Greek text for every one of your questions, but every once in a while we do. So anyway, I hope this has been helpful to you. You've been listening to Thinking Out Loud podcast, where we think out loud about current events and Christian hope.
Thanks for listening to Thinking Out Loud. If you'd like to learn more about what we do, book Nathan or Cameron, or if you'd like to support us financially, whether through a one-time donation or on a monthly basis, you can do so on the donate page at www.toltogether.com. That's toltogether.com. And please consider leaving us a 5-star rating and sharing this content with your friends. It really does help.